evening, good afternoon, and good morning from wherever you are. My name is Bernard Ondiek, and I take this opportunity to welcome all of you who've joined this webinar. And I believe that you're going to learn a lot from this, and we'll be receiving your feedback during the webinar and also after the webinar through our community of practice. So to begin with, I'm going to just request you to to record your details, like your name and maybe where you're coming from, like the rest have already started doing within the chat. And then we also have a place called the Q&A where you can ask all the questions as the presentation is going on so that we can be able to tackle them after the session. So we'll be able to go through all the questions and then respond to them. And we'll also give opportunities to a few of you to be able to voice out some of the areas that they'll need clarification in the course of the presentation. That is when the presentation is done. Before we begin, we request that you allow us record this presentation in case there is anyone who has an issue with recording. Kindly just notify us, but otherwise we are going to record the presentation. So allow me to start with a brief intro, and then I'm going to invite the panelists who are going to give us the presentation. So I'll be sharing right now. So the initiative that has given us this opportunity to do this webinar is the Afrique Research Support Hub, with an acronym ARSH. And my name is Bernard Ondiek. And this project is actually supported by the Wellcome Trust Fund. So who are we at APHRC? I believe most of you have heard of African Population and Health Research Center, but you don't have information on who we are. So our vision is basically to transform lives in Africa, and this one we are doing through research. And our mission is to generate evidence to strengthen research and related capacity in Africa, research and development ecosystem, and also engage policy to inform action on health and development. That is why we exist. And how does research transform lives? So the evidence that we get in research is mostly used in making decisions. And these decisions would affect or would impact lives either directly or indirectly. And the research is done by more people, and the evidence is used. And this evidence is used, and the people doing the research will use the expertise to support decisions that directly or indirectly impact lives. So some of the decisions that are generated from research include policy. So your organization can come up with a new policy, change policy, or improve. Or the ones that are there can actually operationalize the policy. It can also help with program design, implementation, and improvement. It can also help you reassign budget to more priority areas. It can also help you to improve your service delivery, come up with practical guidelines. And then it can also help you have a good uptake of the tools that you're using, as well as improve your innovation. Then definitely the decisions will be able to help the individual, you as an individual, or even your institution or community to change the way you do things. So APHRC has projects in 35 countries as you are speaking. And this is highlighted in this map of Africa where we are located. So you'll see that we have a wider spread within the sub-Saharan Africa. And we have 3 programmatic areas in our work. That includes research. So you'll find us doing a lot of research. Then we don't just stop at research. We also do policy engagement and advocacy. Then we also do capacity strengthening. So those are the 3 programmatic areas that APHRC dwells in. Then our partnership models are actually vary in length and duration, and our models are formalized. We have formalized our partnerships. We also have long-term, we have mutual learning and capacity strengthening. So it depends with the project that we actually work with. So for us to be able to engage in research and capacity strengthening, we have a strategic objective for being able to do our capacity strengthening. And that one is housed within the research and related capacity strengthening division. And this division actually looks at 3 areas. The first one is the individual capacity strengthening, which is housed within the individual capacity strengthening unit. And at the individual level, we aim to strengthen the technical, intrapersonal, and interpersonal aspects of individuals' capacity. And when we strengthen this, then the individual is able to undertake high quality research or related functions that contribute entirely to the development and implementation of Africa's self-sufficiency in research and development. Then we also strengthen institutions, and this one now is mapped under our institution capacity strengthening unit. So here we strengthen institution capacity so that the institutions are able to collaboratively develop stroke enhance systems, structures, and processes. And at the end of the day, this one will promote research and development in Africa. Then now we also look at the ecosystem, and the ecosystem is anchored within our R&D ecosystem unit. And here we strengthen support structures, regulatory frameworks, and linkages for African research institutions and researchers. And the aim of this is so that we can become critical voices and drivers of the development agenda in Africa. So that's basically what our wing, our research and related capacity strengthening wing does. And this project is actually anchored within the research and related capacity strengthening. And some of the things that we are aiming to achieve is to be able to become Africa-centric research support hub. And we'll be able to provide practical research, grantmanship skills, which are required to conceptualize research and also successfully fundraise for it. That's why the project was born. And the project actually focuses on 3 regional satellites. So we have a satellite in West Africa, West and Central Africa. We have another satellite in South Africa, and we also have another satellite in East Africa. And this initiative will be running for 3 years, that is from 2024 up to 2027. And what we aim to do is to ensure that we give access to resources to the participants. We'll give mentorship. We'll also give light training. And for selected participants, and you'll be able to see who are these selected participants in the next slides, we'll be able to give them intense training with protected time so that they are able to write award-winning grant proposals. So we target our audience. Our audiences are mainly early and mid-career researchers, and this includes the post-PhDs, the people who are currently doing PhDs, and the people who are in research as a career. And there are several ways in which we are able to interact with them. And one of the ways is through our learning management system platform, where we have our courses, our e-courses. We also interact with them through webinars. We also interact with them by giving them resources that they are able to interact with. So this is a diagram that shows the level of interaction. So for the postgraduate and pre-doctoral researchers, and this is where most of participants fall in, we give them access to our virtual learning academy. And here they are able to access monthly webinars, their self-paced training courses. Then we also have facilitated training courses. And we also have a large community of practice where people are able to share their learnings. So here the people are, we have experienced people, we have people who are trying to get knowledge. So we put them together and they are able to communicate with each other. And then we also have a focus on post-PhD. And these ones, we have placed them in various satellites. So here we ensure that we do with them the face-to-face grant writing workshops. Then we also match them with mentors for 12 months. Then we allow them an opportunity to participate in a seed grant whereby their ideas are funded. So some of the ways in which we are engaging you include the public webinars with question and answers. So every month we have a webinar that is tailored towards a particular area within the grant writing. So like this month is on the ethics in budgeting. Next month we'll have another. So we have a webinar series whereby every month we try to tackle a given area which is of interest to researchers. Then we have a self-directed online course. And this online course, as you'll be seeing in the next slide, we advertised it in April, and it really attracted quite a number of people. I'll be sharing more about it. And this is a course that is placed within the virtual academy, and we've selected participants who will be able to undertake the course. Then for the ones who succeed in this self-directed course, we give them an opportunity for a more focused, facilitated time, whereby they are able to be taken through the grant writing with experts in a face-to-face manner. So this is the course that we launched. So we launched a course in March for grant writing. And as you can see from this, we're able to get over 6,000 people who showed interest. And you can also be able to see the gender distribution. We had men 58%, and we had women who were 42%. Then you can also see the field. So you realize that quite a number were from the medical sciences. We also had social sciences. And then we also had biological and also arts and humanities. So this was the distribution of the participants from this. And out of this, we didn't put them in the course at the same time. So we decided to come up with a cohort-based method of enrollment. So the first cohort, we selected 50. The second cohort, again, we'll be selecting, we've selected 50. And then the third cohort will be increasing the number. So if you are among the people who enrolled in the course, be patient. We will reach you. And we are planning that by the end of this year, everybody who had applied will be able to get an opportunity to access this course in our virtual learning academy. So this is the pipeline of the people who showed interest in the self-paced course in our virtual learning academy. So the first phase, we said that we are going to open the course to everyone. So we did that. And then the people who have been selected to start the course will have an opportunity to go through the course, and then they are going to have their proposal go through peer review. And once this is done, they are going to receive a certificate and a digital badge. Then the ones who have written very nice proposals or concepts, they're going to be given another opportunity whereby they'll get they'll get an opportunity for facilitated training where their proposals will be refined further with more peer review. And then after that, they are going to refine it again with more experts. So there'll be a kind of a mentorship program whereby their concepts will be looked at more. Then we also have the satellites, which I mentioned earlier. So we've already done a face-to-face training for East Africa. We are doing one in ACT for West Africa, and then we'll also have another one for Southern African region. So when we make a call, especially for West Africa and South Africa, kindly apply so that you can get an opportunity to be able to attend residential training on grant writing. Now, an opportunity for us all. How do you engage us as APHRC, the Virtual Learning Academy? How do you engage us? So the first thing you can do, join our self-paced courses. So keep on looking at our social media handles. Whenever we have webinars, join. Whenever you see an opportunity for a self-paced course, you can also join. Some are free, so take advantage of that. Then we also have our community of practice, which again, you can join free. And in our community of practice, we have opportunity for you to meet several participants from within your field and others outside your field, and you are able to engage with them. And we encourage questions to be asked in that platform so that we are able to increase our skills and our knowledge in grants writing. I will be sharing the link for the community of practice on the chat briefly. So once you get to our community of practice page, that is actually it's here, cop.aphrc.org. The first thing that you'll be required to do is to log in after you've created your account. And once you've logged in, you'll be able to select a community. So I encourage you to select the grant writing community. Then you can do your self-introduction. And this way I normally tell participants to brand yourself well so that other participants will know about you, and even the funders, when they are looking through, they can be able to pick your details and contact you if there is anything that they want you as somebody with your specialization to be able to do. Then after you've done self-introduction, you need to engage, and this one you'll do through questions and answers. Yeah, so I'll be sharing the link on WhatsApp so that you can join. And then in case there are any other questions, I'll be able to respond to them through the Q&A section or the chat section. And also my colleague also, in case there's any technical issue, my colleagues also will be able to support. So that's my brief introduction to the project. So I'll now be inviting the panelists who are going to take us through the next session. And we have two panelists. So the first panelist is Hannah Munyao. So Hannah holds a bachelor's degree in integrated community development from Daystar University and is currently pursuing an MBA in strategic management from the same institution. She has over a decade of experience in international NGOs, and she also has successfully managed grant writing, donor engagement, stakeholder partnerships, and capacity building. And to cap it all, Hannah has secured multi-million grants through diverse funding strategies, fundraising strategies, institutional partnerships, and individual donations. And she has an extensive expertise in proposal development and grants management. As a business development officer, Hannah plays a key role in researching, identifying, and leading the application process of funding opportunities, and this aligns with the center's strategic goals, ensuring financial sustainability. She has specifically supported data science programs and data synergy evaluation unit, facilitating resource mobilization and fostering partnerships. So maybe, Hannah, you can just show your camera so that people can see you. Okay, so that is Hannah. Now you can remove your camera. Thank you. Then the next speaker, I'll just introduce all of them because they'll be speaking after this, is Grace Kemani. She's a seasoned fundraiser and business development professional, currently contributing to the APHRC. And in her role, she focuses on donor engagement and proposal development, and she plays a pivotal part in securing substantial funding for the organization. She's currently pursuing a PhD in strategic management at Kenyatta University, and she also has a master's degree in strategic management and a bachelor's in community development. Grace has over 11 years of experience, and she has collaborated with the diverse donors, private foundation and governmental bodies, and her portfolios include successful engagements with organizations such as USAID, European Union, European Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid Operations, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, Commonwealth and Development Office, MasterCard Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Porticus, and the Lego Foundation. So Grace, you can also put on your camera. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So allow me to take this opportunity to invite our panelists. You can invite them by giving them a clap, a virtual clap, as they join as they take over. Thank you. Okay, and feel free to put in your questions in the Q&A. We'll be able to answer them on the go. And then at the end, we'll also be able to answer in case there is any that has not been answered. Thank you.
So Bernard, I assume that I can now take over?
Kindly take over. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. So happy to be part of this webinar, and I can see we have a participant of 143. That is very good participation. So today we are going to discuss ethics related to budgeting. And to start off, is a question of ethics. Now, the basic definition of ethics that we all know is the science of what is right and what is wrong. So today we want to look at what is right and what is wrong. What are the do's and the don'ts when it comes to budgeting, and specifically related to budgeting for grants. Now, those people who are privileged, because the society thinks people who work in the NGO sector are privileged. When you say you're working in an NGO, people always think, oh, you're earning a lot of money. Oh, NGOs have a lot of money. But it's actually not really the case per se. NGOs have money, but this money is donor money. This is not their money. It is money they have been given by donors, and they're supposed to account for this money. And this money, you cannot use it for the purposes which the donor has not given you the money for, or you cannot use that money to invest in other things that you have not actually discussed or are not in line with the donor guidelines. And that makes it very important to have ethics in budgeting, especially when you're writing your grants. So what we mean by ethical budgeting, it's actually that process where you create a budget that is accurate, a budget that is transparent, and a budget that is aligned with the actual needs and objectives of the proposed research. So when you are writing grants, and today we have a bias to research, you have your objectives, you have the research questions, you have the outputs that you want to achieve, and therefore you have the activities that you have to engage in. You have to align those activities, or rather you have to align the budget to the activities. And therefore, you have to be very sure that the activities that you proposed or the activities that you suggested in your proposal are actually those that are going to be budgeted for. And therefore, it involves just responsibly estimating cost. So you have to estimate the cost responsibly. Of course, responsibly also, you have to consider the market. You don't exaggerate the costs, and you do not as well underestimate the cost, because if you underestimate the cost, then it will become very difficult for you to deliver the projects. Maybe the cost of travel, for instance, maybe the cost of hiring conference facilities. So you have to estimate them correctly, and therefore, so that you can be able to implement your project activities. It is therefore being intentional, to ensure that the allocation of resources actually reflects on the proposed research. Next slide, please. And therefore, what guides ethical budgeting? So we have principles that you can use to guide you when you're drawing up your budgets. So one is transparency. So you have to clearly justify every line item. And this comes with a section of the budget, which Hannah is going to talk about, the budget narrative. That's why donors will ask you to have a budget narrative so that you can be able to justify all the costs. So if we are spending 100,000, so what are we going to use this 100,000? If we are traveling, what are these travels for? Now you have to also be very accuracy. You need to find out the costs that are related to the activities. So for instance, if say you're going to pay a consultant, so you have to give a reasonable range that consultants in a certain field or in a certain sector are paid. So you need to be very accurate. Accountability, you have to use the funds as intended and track expenses meticulously. So you cannot use money for activities you had not proposed. And in the event that happens, then you have to go back and consult the donor. Of course, that is not encouraged. You have to foresee this ahead of time when you're drawing your budget. You also have to align your budget with the mission. So you need to ensure that the budget items directly support project goals so that you don't have misalignment with the mission or the purpose for which the proposal has been written. Now, you also need to be compliant. You need to follow all the guidelines set by funders and institutional policies. So when funders issue the calls for proposal, they always give guidelines, and you need to be very keen to those guidelines, because those guidelines are going to guide you to the allowable cost and the disallowable costs. We're going to look at that in another slide. Next slide, please. So therefore, what are the ethical considerations in budget planning? So transparency and accountability, we've discussed, that is one of the key considerations when you're drawing your budgets ethically. Now, you also need to look at conflict of interests. So you need to disclose any personal or professional connections that might influence financial decisions. Now, for example, you have received money, or rather you're drawing your budget and you intend to use partners to help you implement the project. So maybe in a consortium, and we're going to define all these terms. So who are these consortium members? Who are these people that you're going to work with? Sometimes people have registered their own CSOs, they have registered their own small organizations, and they are working for another organization. So if you happen to be the PI or you happen to be the lead, you know that you're going to subgrant your organization that you've registered for, maybe through proxy. Now that is conflict of interest, and therefore you need to disclose. It is wrong to transfer money or to subgrant a CSO or any partner which is affiliated to you or which you have conflict in, and you fail to disclose. Then we have fair use of funds. So ensure that funds are strictly used for the project activities as proposed. We have had cases of small NGOs or even big NGOs that have been blacklisted by donors simply because they used the donor money for the wrong reasons. You could have proposed a project, and maybe in the process of implementation, you change your target participants or beneficiaries, or you feel that this category of beneficiaries are more needy than the other. Now, you cannot use donor money to respond to your emergencies. And if such has to happen, especially in the humanitarian sector, you always have to communicate to the donor, and the donor has to give a go-ahead before you can reallocate the money to other activities that were not earlier planned in the proposal. So you also need to respect donor intent. So you need to align spending with the funder's goal and restrictions. So every donor, by the time they're giving money, they have a vision, they have a goal, they have the impact that they want to see. So you should use money to help the donor achieve that impact which they actually had intended. Then managing budget changes. So you need to review the budgets and adjust accordingly as you continue implementation or you continue burning the money. So managing budget is very important because sometimes things happen, crises come in the process of implementation, and genuinely you need to readjust, genuinely you need to overspend. So this has to be communicated again to the donor. Then you also need to avoid or to prevent budget padding. So this includes avoiding inflating cost to create excess buffers. So there are people who, when they are budgeting, they inflate costs, they double costs of maybe items, procurement, and the likes. So this is something that is very unethical and should be avoided when you're doing budgeting. You also need to factor in institutional policies in determining the pay scales. So part of the budget is the pay for the people who are going to implement the project. Now, most funders usually will ask for the organizational policies regarding pay, or even maybe the pay scales. So you need to align to the policy of your organization when it comes to determining the pay scale for the staff that are going to be part of the implementation. Now, we know some donors are generous, others are a bit strict or stingy, for lack of a better word. So it is wrong to take advantage of generous donors to pay staff more than the policy actually dictates. So ethical budgeting is very key in sustaining the donor relationship, and we need to be very, very careful when we are doing our budgets, because this is something that can really mess up the relationship between a researcher or an organization with a donor. So I will invite my colleague Hannah to proceed with the next slide, please.
Thank you, Grace, for taking us through that section. And I'll start with just asking a question so that we try and get the perception or view that we have in terms of the budgeting, because sometimes people may hear numbers, budget, Excel sheet, and maybe they switch off. So I'll start with this question: who prepares the budget? And I'd like to engage us in this question for you to put your answer on the chat. Who prepares the budget? In terms of just a title role, who prepares the budget? When now we are responding to a research call and we are preparing the budget. Grace, help me with the chat. I can't see the chat, maybe the responses.
I'm checking.
All right. It could be from your experience, from your belief in terms of what you think is just right, or an idea. Who do you think prepares the budget?
So I can read out the responses. So someone thinks finance manager, finance officers, a finance person, an accountant, a principal investigator, that is from Austin, the one preparing her projects, researchers and the finance officers, PI, lead consultant, the research team, and the like.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for those responses. It's good to get our ideas even as we discuss about this. So the budgeting process is very, very important. And I don't know if my slides are moving.
No, they're not.
Okay. So thank you for those responses. And we are saying that the best practice is that the budget should be prepared by the person who is designing the program. And in this case, as Austin mentioned, the principal investigator or the lead researcher in this case, or a program lead, a program manager, the program project manager, depending on the title that you use, but it is the lead researcher and the person who has overall designed the project, because this is the person who has a very good understanding of the project, is the one who has ideated the project, conceptualized, and is able to have a oversight of how the project is being steered forward. So the principal investigator, for the ones who say the finance person, the finance manager, they come in as a consultant or a support role in helping cost what has already been identified as cost items. Because in a scenario, in a typical scenario, you have the lead researcher design the concept, come up with activities, and they're able to visualize the sub-activities that then the finance specialist or the finance manager will come in a supportive role to help cost. All right. So in the budgeting preparation process, it is a collaborative effort, but it is very key that the principal investigator takes charge in steering the process so that the budget also reflects the idea of the project. And when you're doing the budget, the first key step is to understand the proposal requirements. And this you do by just going through the budget requirements and looking at the allowable cost, the disallowable costs, the indirect cost rates that are stipulated by the donor. So this is a very critical step because you need to understand what the donor has put as a requirement, because different donors have different requirements, and we'll define the allowable and disallowables in the subsequent slides. But this is a critical step because it will inform how you then draft your budget. And then you need to list down the clear work packages or activities that will be involved in your project. So, for example, we are doing health project, and we have put out the work packages and sub-activities. So for example, we have a work package on maybe conducting a formative research to understand health issues in pregnant women, or if pregnant women are taking self-care during pregnancy. So if we have such a tentative activity title, we'll have sub-activities. Could involve maybe data collection, stakeholder analysis or mapping, data analysis, dissemination of the findings. So this is a very critical step. And if you now relate with what I was talking about, the person preparing the budget, you'll see now that the PI or the principal investigator clearly is well placed to define clear work packages and activities, even in terms of targets. The numbers that is in a population sample. So then this informs the finance person to be able to cost, right? So when you have done that, you also identify cost categories for the activities and then use realistic and justifiable figures. And what Grace mentioned about not exaggerating the figures, but using the realistic figures. And then from that step, you now draft the budget template. Usually, most donors will give a donor-specific template. So this step is very critical so that you don't use your own template and submit it to the donor when they have a specified template. So if you're working on a separate template, you'll be able to transfer and ensure that you have not just copy-pasted from previous budgets, but you just ensure that you're very keen to use the donor-specific template that has been set out. And then you need to prepare a budget narrative justifying each of the costs. So this is usually very important because there is the other side of the donor. You have done your budget, and from your point of understanding, it makes sense or you understand, but it's going to a third party. So you need to explain each of the costs and justify them. And then you also need to ensure that you double check for consistency and any errors. There are key components of a research budget that are very important for our understanding, even as you get the finance person to be able to support, because they're providing a supportive role. So the major overarching like titles, we have the direct cost and the indirect cost, all right? So the direct costs these are costs that are directly attributed and charged to a project. So these are costs that would not exist if the project is not there. So such costs are for the planned project activities, dedicated project personnel, specific equipment for the project, and supplies used by the project. So these are what we call direct costs, and they are very key in delivering the project. And then we have the indirect costs. The indirect costs are costs that cannot be directly attributed to a particular project or program. So these costs generally include facility expenses like rent, utilities, information systems, and other supportive roles that are used to support a project like HR, accounting, M&D, and legal. So each donor has a set, or what we call, they have capped the indirect cost rate. So the indirect cost rate for different donors would be different. So for example, if you check on Welcome indirect cost policy, it states that the total cost for overheads, it's usually used interchangeably. The overheads and the indirect costs should not be more than 20%. So they have capped it at 20%. If you go to another donor, like probably the Gates Foundation, there'll be specific indirect cost rates for specific institution. So if it's a government, they may have a government agency, it may be 0%. The universities in the US, they would say 10%. Other institutions would be 15%. So depending on the donor, they'll have different indirect cost rates. And donors have capped this so that there's efficient use of resources, there's accountability, there's transparency, and there's also allocation of money to implement projects. So that is why the indirect costs are normally capped. All right. So those key things now guide even the steps that you take when you're doing the actual drafting of the budget. So when you're budgeting, the terms that we normally come across, and they're very key for our understanding, so that we know what the donor expects from us. So there's an issue that there's a term that's normally used called co-financing. And co-financing is the requirement to make a financial contribution to jointly fund a project with the donor. So this is just simply the donor only funds part of the overall project budget, and it is a contractual obligation for the fund recipient to finance the remaining part of the budget. So for example, the overall project budget for, say, our health project will be 200,000 USD. And the donor has put it as a contractual obligation for you to fund maybe 50,000, and then the donor will fund 150,000. All right. So this would normally be stipulated in the call or in the grant requirements. And then there's also a term, cost sharing. Cost sharing is similar to co-financing, but typically it refers to the requirement where you're required to contribute a portion of the cost as well. But now if you look at co-financing, as the recipient, you're able to get the funding from multiple sources to co-finance the project. So even if it's in a consortium, when you're co-financing, maybe this partner would bring in this much, another partner, so that to meet the overall budget. But looking at cost sharing, it's the recipient and the donor, and the recipient typically to show just commitment and also commitment to the project. There is the commitment that you have made that you will contribute either in kind to deliver the project. So for example, if it is rent, you'd say you'll cost share the cost and then you'll not charge the donor the cost for rent. So those are just the two major differences. The co-financing bit can have multiple contributors in terms of the recipients, and then the cost sharing would be to the donor and the recipient. Pre-financing, this is where now the advance payment of funds is made by the donor so that you're able to start activities. So it allows you to just begin the activities without having to use your own money upfront. So you realize that this is like now a liability that your organization or institution has, because when you are pre-financed, it's not income. You owe the donor. So it is very important that you realize if you're pre-financed, you have to spend so that you report to the donor. So these are like the key requirements that you need to know, because if you have been pre-financed, there's a requirement from your end to ensure that you spend and give reports so that it does not look like a liability. Only when you spend, you'll be able to look at it as income or revenue for your organization that has come in and has been spent. But before that, you owe the donor. The other key term is in-kind contribution, and these are non-cash contributions that are made to a project, such as personal time, office space, equipment, or services. Could have also donations in there. So the other one is allowable costs, and allowable costs are funds that are to be used exclusively for the budgetary process set forth in the project. So allowable costs are the costs that you were able to be approved by the donor to implement the project. So those are allowable costs. And when you're budgeting, you need to look out for costs that the donor allows to be in the budget. Otherwise, you don't want to do your draft budget and put in costs that are not allowable, yet the donor has set forth that these are the allowable costs. Disallowable costs are costs that are ineligible and cannot be charged to the project. So some of these costs include legal costs or costs that are incurred outside the contractual period. Yeah, so these are disallowable. Other donors would also put things like penalties, things like alcohol. So you need to look out for disallowable costs that are stipulated by the donor so that you're not on the wrong side of budgeting. Other key things to ensure is that your budget should match the narrative proposal. And that's why we mentioned earlier that this needs to be a collaborative effort, because imagine a scenario where, let's say, a budget talks of participants X and the narrative proposal talks about participants Y. They're not in tandem. So there should be alignment of the budget and the proposal, and also the budget narrative. So all three should be in tandem. And then you also need to consider also another very important thing when you're budgeting, and even as we say, the finance is coming in to support. It's also key for the principal investigator to look out for these issues. So you need to factor in issues such as price increases due to inflation or exchange rate fluctuations, and budget for it. You need to budget for like an annual cost adjustment for specific activities, because you need to be able to deliver the projects well. And if you do not budget for inflation, when it is very high, you'll not be able to deliver what you promised to the donor. So most donors would allow a 3 to 5% inflation cost. So every year you need to make a provision for that in the specific activities, and then put annual cost adjustment so that it is captured. Yeah, so there are things that may not need inflation. For example, things that you just the one-time capital purchases, let's say a laptop or a vehicle. So those ones may not need the inflation planning, but now there are specific activities that you need to plan for. And then you need to also ensure that the donor indirect cost rate is adhered to. So if they have mentioned the cap is at 20, is at 15, you need to ensure you adhere to that. And then you need to understand the payment terms. I talked about this when defining the pre-financing requirement and the liabilities therein. And also, one thing you need to also look out for is the budget ceiling. So normally you have a donor give probably a maximum budget. So you should not budget over what the donor has put in the guidelines. So this should be adhered to. The common ethical budget pitfalls that we normally make, because the budget is a very critical document that the donor uses to make a decision whether your project is fundable, whether they are going to fund you. And the common pitfall that people fall to is underestimating costs, and also overestimating, leading to project underfunding and potential compromises, and then also misallocation of funds, using grant money for purposes that you had not set out to, and also vague justification, just putting a sentence for the sake of it. So your justification needs to be well narrated and be very clear, because poorly documented budget items and just vague narrations is a red flag with the funder. And then the other thing is insufficient contingency planning, not accounting for unexpected costs or project delays. And this leads to financial shortfalls, and also not adhering to the funder guidelines. So these are very critical things that you need to watch out for when doing the budget. And also the ethical blind spots. So overlooking ethical considerations such as compensating staff fairly or failing to address issues of conflict of interest. So to be able to avoid these pitfalls, you need to do the budgeting process collaboratively and ensure that all the guidelines that are stipulated are adhered to. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you for listening and thank you for your time. I think I'll give it back to Bernard to moderate the other session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah and Grace, for that wonderful presentation and exposing us to a lot of information about ethics in budgeting. So at this juncture, I'll leave it open for people to be able to put in their questions on the chat. And as participants are doing that, there are some questions that I will want to put across that were asked in the chat. So as I'm doing that, kindly just add as many questions as you have on the chat so that you're able to respond to them. So maybe I'll read two questions that were put on the chat, and then Hannah and Grace, you're going to respond. So the first one is, please share a sample budget narrative. Then the second one, kindly highlight the term non-cost extension. So maybe you can handle those two.
Thank you, Ben. I will come in with the non-cost extension. I think the other one is not a question, but just a request that we share a sample budget narrative. Maybe
Yeah.
we can share with you, Bernard, and then you can
Okay.
share with the participants.
Okay.
So when you talk about, so we have costed extensions and non-costed extensions. So I'll start with the non-costed extension. Now, when you're programming or when you're writing your proposal and you're coming up with your log frame or you're coming up with the activities and the plan for your activities, you always predetermine the time that you're going to take to implement the project. Now, let's give an example of a project that is going to be implemented within 3 years. Now, you implement successfully, but along the way, there could be some delays. Maybe the project did not start as planned. Let's say you had planned to start in January, but then you started the project in March, so giving like a 2 months delay. Now this will affect the duration of implementation because it means you have spent 2 months with no activities, yet these 2 months had been planned for. So at the end of the 3 years, you will have spent money, or rather you will have exhausted the time that you had committed to finish the project, but you have activities pending. You have activities that you have not finished. So you have now to request a non-costed extension. A non-costed extension is an extension to the duration that you had initially committed, but you're not asking for any money from the donor, or the donor is not giving you any money. So say you had been given $3 million. So still with your $3 million and you had committed 3 years, you're going to implement with now 3 years and an extension of 2 months, but still within the same budget. So that is what we call a non-costed extension. So basically, you're extending the period or the duration of implementation, but not with any additional budgets. So the opposite is true for the costed extension. So for the costed extension, you can request maybe the donor to add more money so that you can be able to implement maybe extra activities per se, but this will have to be negotiated or discussed with the donor ahead, or the same activities, but maybe there's something genuine that came up and you had not anticipated probably, and you discuss with the donor and the donor agrees to give you more money. Alternatively, a costed extension can also happen because you probably want to maybe extend that project to another location. Maybe it has worked for one, and then you want to probably extend it to another location, which you had not anticipated, but you thought it would also be very helpful to probably extend that to, or to increase the number of beneficiaries because you thought it was necessary to increase the number of beneficiaries, but this again has to be discussed with the donor. So for both costed and non-costed extension, it is something that you really have to discuss with the donor, and it is within the discretion of the donor to give or not to give. But now, basically, it is not good practice to keep asking for this costed or especially non-costed extension. One, it eats to your indirect budgets. Remember the indirect percentage that we talked about, the money that you don't account for. So if you're given 500,000 as your indirect cost to deliver that project, this money goes into your facilities, into your support staff, into your rent and the likes. So what are you saying? If you request for non-cost extension, you're still consuming this money and paying people, or rather you're paying people with your organizational money. Either you exhaust this budget or you have to use your organizational money to continue paying the staff. So it is not advisable to request or to encourage staff to keep requesting for non-costed extension. I hope I have answered that. Over
Okay,
to you,
thank you.
Bridget.
Thank you so much. The next question, this has been asked by Tusi. How do I budget to ensure that currency fluctuation does not affect the project negatively? How do I buffer for currency fluctuation? I think, Grace, you can answer this.
Okay, thank you. I think Hannah had pointed to that, but I will just add something. So there are donor guidelines that will give you a percentage. So you utilize or you incorporate the currency buffer into your budget. So depending on the donor, some can give you a 5%, and this is sometimes tied to inflation and currency exchange. So those unforeseen eventualities. So you make sure as you budget, you have an allowance or you have a buffer for that. Alternatively, you can utilize multi-currency accounts so that when maybe the currencies or there is a lot of fluctuation, if it is possible, you can make payments with a currency that is a bit stable. What else you can do? You can also involve, if it is possible, consultants where you're technically not in a position or your organization does not have the technical expertise to draw such budgets, or just to get a consultant's opinion before you can submit the budget to the donors. So you can utilize those three options.
Okay, thank you. Then there's still another one that is closer to that. Is contingency cost and inflation cost the same or different? That is from Pinto.
Contingency and inflation, I would say inflation is part of contingency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Normally, donors will not encourage contingency budgets because contingency budgets are likely to be misused. So I would say inflation is part of contingency, but a contingency budget is a very broad term. So you have to specify, or you have to be very specific. So this is contingency for what? It could be inflation, it could be exchange rate, it could be emergencies and crises. And it is important to note that even with the contingency budget, the way you spend it has to be accounted for. You have to account for every coin that you spend, even if it were in the category of contingency budgets.
Okay, thank you for that. Then another
Yeah.
question, maybe for Hannah. Is it always a good practice to include contingency when budgeting for a project?
Thank you, Bernard. Just picking up from what Grace has mentioned, I think you just need to be very clear on what contingency, because contingency and inflation are both unexpected. So you have to be clear of what you're budgeting for and avoid the term contingency. So say this is for the exchange rate, this is the annual cost adjustment. So just being specific and avoiding the lumping of contingency, even miscellaneous you don't use. So just being specific so that you're able to be clear to the donor.
Okay, thank you, Hannah, for that. Then Charles is asking, from your experience, how have you dealt with the donors who do not allow inclusion of indirect costs?
Maybe I can go and Hannah can add. So donors who do not allow inclusion of indirect costs. Now, there are two ways to go about this. Then they should allow you to, or such donors would be willing to take up your project implementation cost or program or project delivery costs. So they will probably allow rent, maybe pay for your rent. They will probably allow you to pay for staffing or some of the staff that are not directly involved in the project. They will allow you to spend money on, because there has to be a program delivery cost to it. So those who don't give an indirect cost, most of them will normally accept to take care of such costs so that you can include them in the budget. Now that is one way. So I personally have not encountered a donor who did not give an indirect cost and they refused to uptake the program delivery costs. Now, and if such would be there, then don't take their money, because how will you deliver? How will you deliver the project? Because the PI will be there, or the direct project staff will be there and paid, but we need We need a cleaner. We need someone to cook tea. You need to pay rent. You need to increase people's salaries because of inflation and the like. So if a donor does not allow for the two, then you have no business taking their money, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, just also to add, thank you, Professor Charles, for your question. I think this overhead question, and in the space there have been debates around this. There's an illustration that really shows what Grace has said. You just say no to the donor. So if you follow Kevin Brown, who's a funder on LinkedIn, there's a parody video of a pizza company that sells pizza, of course, and then an investor comes and says they want to buy the pizza at a lower cost and not pay for any overhead. And they actually say they'll not pay for packing boxes and all that. And you can imagine the kind of work that goes into preparing pizza, the toppings and all that. So this illustration really shows that you cannot deliver without your overheads being covered. Otherwise, you'll have no impact. You'll ruin your reputation because of not delivering quality programs. So I also haven't come across a donor who doesn't cater for overheads. So yeah, you just need to allow inclusion of the indirect. Over to you, Bernard.
And he still asks, is there a more universal acceptable of costing man-hour for time committed to the project? I hope I was clear.
Come again? Sorry?
What is the best way of estimating man-hour that could be committed to the project? And is there a more universal acceptable of costing man-hour for time committed to a project?
I'll go then. Hannah, you can add. So when you talk about man hour, we have a common term called level of effort. I think that is, it means the same because it means the time you're committing to project implementation. So is there a universal way of costing that? I wouldn't say there is a universal way of costing that. I had mentioned organizational policy, pay policy. Every organization will have a pay policy. There is how you do compensation. Now, how you determine entry level, how you determine growth, your policy towards salary increment and all that. So when you're determining the level of effort or man hour, you should be guided by your policy. And these policies don't have to be necessarily the same. But of course, we all know when we are developing policies, we benchmark with the same with peers in the industry. So not to say that there is a universal way, but that should be guided by the organizational policy. So for instance, assume, or let's give an example of a PI who is going to be in two projects. Now, in one project, they're going to give 30% of their time, and the other project, they're going to give 70% of their time. So basically, you just take 70% of their salary, and usually you cost the gross, plus or any fringe benefits, pension, medical, every cost that the organization incurs to keep this PI in the organization. So 70% of that will go to project one, 30% of that will go to the other project. So that is how you cost the level of effort. So if now coming down to hours, if for example, the project is very specific to the number of hours per month or per week, whatever, then you just do the math and convert that, the pay for that PI or whoever into hours, and that is what you use to calculate.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Grace. Maybe just to weigh in, because most of the time the level of effort you need to be realistic when you're putting the percentage that you have committed, the PI or other key staff for the project. So, for example, you can't have the project lead at a 10% probably level of effort because they will not give the project commitment or much time to be able to deliver. So some you should be able to realistically look and ensure that they are well covered. And then also sometimes the donor may prescribe and say that the lead PI needs to dedicate at least more than 20% of their research time for this project. For other very heavy projects, they will say 80%. So yeah, there may not be a universally agreed method, but it should be very consistent with how the delivery of the project is expected.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So allow me to go to two of the participants who raised their hands before we can go back to the charts. So Mercury, Chitindo. Topista, I don't know whether we need to give them rights, okay? And Abdullahi Ali. So Mercury, you can go first.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm sorry, I raised my hand, then maybe I raised by mistake.
Okay.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Abdullahi. Abdullahi, you can go ask your question. Abdullahi, you are muted. Kindly unmute. Okay, seems Abdullahi is unable to unmute. Let's go to the charts again. In case anybody has a question that they feel that they want to voice out, just raise up your hand and we'll give you an opportunity to speak. Meanwhile, next question is kindly elaborate on negotiating tips for overheads with funders that don't cover or fund overheads, if you have experienced this before.
So how to negotiate indirect costs?
Yes.
Now, that becomes tricky if it is a competitive call. It actually is impossible because once a call is published and it's a competitive call, then the funder would be looking out for the best that can comply to their terms. So in that case, you don't have an option than to comply. Now, the only way you can negotiate for this is when you are raising money through the non-traditional way, the unsolicited way, where you approach the donor, have an initial meeting with them, discuss what you do, then they buy into your ideas, they welcome you for maybe a pitching, or maybe they ask you to write a one-pager or a concept note, and the concept note goes through, like you are co-creating with the funder, and then now you work with the funder until you get to the budget level. So at that point, you have the window to negotiate for an indirect cost. But this is not your normal way of doing things for donors. Most donors will just say, for us, we do 20%, take or leave. Very few donors will be willing to negotiate this because you see also donors have their own internal policies, which they will not probably be willing to change for just one applicant or one implementer. Because in this space of implementation of programs, I don't think there's any organization that can stand out and say we are very unique. We always implement programs that can not be implemented by anyone else in the world. So we are competing in this space, and therefore, sometimes we don't have a lot of leeway to negotiate the indirect costs. But it is in very, very rare occasion, and this has to start with donor cultivation. You build a relationship over the years, so the donor has trusted you, and therefore you have built such a strong relationship and they have seen your value or the quality of your programming, such that they're willing to give you even a better indirect cost or a higher indirect cost for you to give them better program delivery.
Okay, thank you. Then we still have another one from Professor Charles. The projects pass through ethical review committee who sometimes charge 10% to the total budget. How do we deal with this? I don't think donor will allow to include the cost for ethical review of your project.
All right, so let me assume that you're talking about ethical review of your, is it your proposal or your projects? Okay, let me answer it two ways. So if you're talking about reviewing your proposals, now donors don't take care of your cost related to proposal development. So the workshops that you will hold to develop a proposal, the review of your proposal to ensure quality, most donors will not fund that. In fact, I have not seen for the longest, unless the few instances where a donor invites you. So most donors who invite you to submit a proposal, you can now negotiate, or already they will take care of that cost of creating a proposal. Now we have unique donors like MasterCard Foundation. MasterCard Foundation, normally for them, you co-create the proposal, like you design the project together. And therefore, in that case, they always take care of the development costs. So they will sponsor your workshops. They are the ones who will review. They will use their own internal reviewers to review your proposal. So that is on the proposal side. Now, if you're referring to review of the program or the projects, I believe at this point we are discussing, at that point we are talking about M&D review, like feedback, reporting, and all that. Again, most donors will take care of that cost. And how do they do that? Through consultancies. So you factor in that budget. If you will do any midline, endline, baseline surveys, or auditing of the audit of your program and all that, most donors will usually take care of that cost. But then you have to budget it initially. I hope I got that question correctly.
Okay, thank you so much. Then the last question. When disbursing funds, some donors remove value-added taxes or withholding taxes from your budget, which reduces your budget. How have you handled this if you did encounter such?
Okay. So now, when it comes to value-added tax or withholding taxes, now, in most cases, donors will usually state that directly in the call for proposal when they're talking about the ceiling for the budget. So if they say that the maximum amount for this project is, let's say, 1 million, they will always include a clause and say, inclusive of VAT and any other. So in that case, then you know from the word go that you're not expecting any refunds, or that cost is on your end. I think that most donors usually will state that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. I think we've exhausted all the questions. The other outstanding question that I've seen on the chat is whether we are going to share the presentations. Yeah, we are going to share the presentation. You can actually get it through our community of practice. I've actually shared the link. So you can check on that link, go to the grants writing community of practice, and under the resources, you should be able to find the presentation. We'll also continue the conversation through your emails. In case there is any more information that you might want to send to you, we'll send it through the email, and you'll also find it through the community of practice. Then there is also a question somebody asked whether we have MSc research grants, and I will answer this one by saying that yes, the MSc research grants are there for people with MSc. You can get such grants, and because those ones are termed as early career researchers, so it's possible to get the grants. I hope that is the question that was asked. Yeah, so now that we don't have any other question, I don't want to lock anyone. We still have 8 minutes. Is there anyone who will want to ask a question from the participants? We give you an opportunity so that we can also hear your voice. Okay, so thank you so much to our panelists who have really presented so well into that topic of budgets, ethical budgeting, and they have actually tackled all the questions that we've asked. So let's give them a clap, virtual claps. Okay, and also thanks to our participants who have actually asked so many questions. And we believe that this webinar has given you more information and has given you more skills as far as budgeting and ethical considerations are concerned. So from APHRC, we wish to thank you and be on the lookout for our next calls. That is for self-paced courses, for webinars. There are times that we'll also put adverts for calls for seed grants. So be on our lookouts, APHRC website, our social media handles, so that you are not left by anything that we are posting. In case you have any more questions, kindly reach us through our emails. We'll be able to respond to you. Reach us through our community of practice, and also visit our virtual learning academy. I'm putting the links there. soma.aphrc.org. You'll find some free courses. And then we have cop.aphrc.org. So there you'll be able to join a community that you feel will be able to add into your career. So I don't have any other thing. I'll call upon Topista to say the last word and also to release us. Welcome, Topista.
Thank you, Bernard, and thank you to Grace and Hannah for the great presentation you've had. For everyone asking, please look out in the next week. We'll be sharing the recording as well as the presentation. You can look out for this in the coming week. And apart from that, do have yourselves a lovely afternoon. And thank you all for participating and having an engaging conversation. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Thank you.